friends, welcome back. My name's Ramon. How are you today? About a month ago, I came out with the video talking about the Black Girl Sunscreen as one of the most hyped, most talked about, highly celebrated sunscreens of this last year, just because it should be, honestly. It's Black owned, it's really affordable, and it's just a really great universal kind of formula. And then everyone was like, can you please try the kids version? Because the kids version has a higher SPF value, a cheaper price, and you still get the same amount. And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Let's try it out, see what the difference is. So today with that, we're trying out the Black Girl Sunscreen for kids, SPF 50. But before we get into it, I'm gonna ask that you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you know when I post more skincare, sunscreen, Fenty related content on my channel. Give the video a thumbs up, and down below, have you tried the kids version? What are your thoughts in comparing the two of these? Do you have a preference for one or the other? Let me know, sound off. So here's a tea. I'm not gonna go completely in depth as I did with the Black Girl Sunscreen, just because the difference between these are a little bit more minimal overall in terms of how the formula is different from one another, but overall the experience for them was actually kind of different. So I'm really just gonna get straight into my 6 F's chemical sunscreen testing rubric, where I talk about the feel, finish, filters, formulation, foundation wear, and fragrance of the sunscreen. I'm gonna show some footage of me applying it and how makeup and whatnot played on top of it. I use my standard 1/4 teaspoon amounts to cover my face, my ears, and my neck. Let that set for a little bit. Makeup on top. And then I also will reapply this as I usually do on top of the makeup as well, just to see how that looks and how it reapplies. Get right into it. First F, feel. Here's a T. A lot of times with kids sunscreens, there's this notion that they're gonna be a little bit less cosmetically elegant. They generally have better protection. The formulations for them are a little bit more gentle and also a lot more moisturizing. So oftentimes it's a lot heavier, a lot more emollient, a little bit more chalky, a lot less fun to work with. But quite honestly, I was very shocked. Looking at them now, I swear the regular Black Girl Sunscreen was a little bit more translucent, but they kind of look the same. But the kids version, this one down here, was a little bit more white to me. It had a little bit more of an opacity when it came right out the bottle, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be, But then, they really go on the skin the same way. They look the same. They work into the skin in a very similar way. They're very emollient, but they set down very clear. But here's the tea. The kids version is a little bit less emollient. I don't know what it is about it. It's not as rich. It's not as creamy once it sets down. I'm not saying it sets down to a matte finish. It still has a little bit of radiance to it, but I feel like it actually does set down. The overall feel of it on the face is still pretty lightweight. I don't actually feel like I felt this on my face even 2, 3, 4 hours since my skin got a little bit more oily compared to the regular Black Girl Sunscreen. So I will say the feel of this is a little bit, emphasizing a little bit more elegant than the regular Black Girl Sunscreen. The finish of it, as I mentioned, it's still radiant. It still gives you a nice glow, but to me it sets down again to a little bit more of a nicer, more natural, radiant glow. In no way matte, in no way natural finish. It's still radiant, but a little bit more workable, especially for my oily, acne-prone skin. Filters for this. So once again, these are both American sunscreens. They have to abide by FDA-approved UV filters. And so they're very similar, but this is where I start to see a little bit more difference, especially in the formulation-wise. The kids version specifically has avobenzone to cover UVA, especially long wavelength UVA rays, as well as homosalate and octisalate. And those two are gonna cover the UVB part of the spectrum. The primary difference is that the kids version does not have octocrylene like the standard version does. And octocrylene can do a few things in filters. Primarily, I like to see it in sunscreens because it's a really great stabilizing filter for avobenzone. Secondly, it's a really great UV filter to have in sunscreens that are water resistant because it just helps to make it more so water resistant. And this does say it's water resistant for 80 minutes, but it's missing the octocrylene. So therefore, I feel like that's relying more on the polymers, cross polymers, and whatnot in the formulation to achieve that. But more so, homosalate and octisalate are interesting filters to have. They are, again, UVB filters. They are not as powerful or as strong necessarily as UVB filters as octocrylene or even oxybenzone, which this specifically says is oxybenzone and octinoxate free. They are featured in the maximum allowed possible concentration and percentages allowed in the US, which is actually a lot higher than allowed in international markets. Homosalate specifically is allowed up to 15% in the US compared to 10% in the UK. And I actually read somewhere that they're apparently going to lower that amount down in the UK, especially down to like about 1.4%. Don't know why. Here's a tea. I actually did do a paper recently on octocrylene and the safety profile behind it for school. And octocrylene overall has a really great safety profile, mostly. The tea behind it being that there are a few very small, very concentrated cases of potential contact dermatitis reactions with children, specifically targeted around octocrylene, specifically in sunscreens. So I think that's a primary reason as to why it's not included in this. Can't say. I actually would have been a little bit more comfortable having octocrylene in this, specifically for more photostability and overall broad spectrum protection, because octocrylene gets a little bit into the UVA part of the spectrum. But overall, they're really good sunscreen filters. If anything, comparison-wise, these are the same exact filters they feature in the Fenty Hydrovisor. So Getting to the formulation aspect of it, beyond just the UV filters, the primary difference between the kids and the regular version, they feature a lot of the same botanical plant seed oils like carrot seed, jojoba, and whatnot, and those are going to give you some emolliencies, skin nourishing benefits with like omega fatty acids, as well as some antioxidant benefits, which are always great. Also, looking into it, carrot seed oil apparently in itself has a little bit of like a UV protection quality to it as well, so it's good to know. But this specifically also has shea butter in it, which is interesting to say because I feel like shea butter in itself is a very nourishing, very rich butter, and I feel like this is less rich than this. The other difference primarily is that this also features chamomile extract, whereas this one doesn't. And this specifically, marketing-wise, really talks about how it's a very moisturizing, but also very soothing, anti-inflammatory formulation. I think that partially comes from the chamomile itself. So there's not a lot of big difference. This also gets rid of a couple like buffering agents that the regular one has, but there's not much more different in this formulation than the original one. Now getting onto foundation wear, compared to the original one, still works beautifully to prep the face for makeup, really moisturize and nourish the skin so that makeup goes beautifully on top of it. Before the reapplication part of this, I did a little 8-hour check-in because we did wait 8 hours before the reapplication, and I was very shocked to see that, especially in my more problematic areas where makeup generally really dissipates, especially with more emollient sunscreens, my makeup was like intact. It looked good. My face looked fresh. I was a little bit shiny, but compared to the original, I was not as shiny as I was with that application and those wear tests. So I was very shocked. I think this is a much better prep for makeup in my opinion. And even more so, especially on my eyelids, not creasy at all. My under eyes looked amazing. I was very shocked. With the reapplication of this, again, this is still very emollient. It's still very rich. And so I was a little bit nervous, especially because as I was putting it on, I was like, this is not working in as quickly as the OG one and a lot of my other chemical sunscreens. But I did eventually set down after about 3 to 5 minutes. It looked amazing. I lost a little bit of coverage in my cheeks. I think that was my fault. But this does reapply beautifully over makeup. No issue. It leaves you, again, radiant. So if you can touch up or carry like a little press powder to do so, do recommend. You can see in the footage, I actually went in with the Fenty Foundation powder, touched up a little bit in my T-zone and some shiny areas, and I was golden. And the last stuff we're gonna talk about is fragrance. Fragrance of this, it still smells like sunscreen. That was my big qualm with the original one, is that it smelled like sunscreen, and that's just a really interesting smell, especially when I'm used to more K-beauty sunscreens where they really have more botanical, more floral scents to them. It's not bad. I think it's a little bit more subdued than the OG version, but it still smells like sunscreen. There's no essential oils necessarily. There are no fragrance added to these, so just to smell the product, the sunscreen at the end of the day. But overall, it's not a negative quality, but just know it does have a smell to it. But it's not bad. And with that, that's my overall experience with the Black Girl Sunscreen's Kids SPF 50 Broad Spectrum Sunscreen. The tea with this is that I wish it did have that octocrylene that the original one does have. I'm not mad as to why it doesn't because I understand why, but I just feel like that would have added a little bit more stability and a little bit more of a reinforced photo protection across the entire spectrum. This is SPF 50. It is broad spectrum. This features the same amount of avobenzone as the original, so I'm not gonna assume it's a much more amplified broad spectrum into the UVA part of the spectrum. If anything, I don't wanna know. That's a big area of opportunity with US sunscreens, is that we just don't have a very transparent way of clarifying and showing the UVA protection you're getting from sunscreens. I wish we did. We just say broad spectrum and assume that's good. So with the lack of octocrylene, the same amount of avobenzone, and a higher percentage of other UVB filters that aren't necessarily the best, I'm a little bit weary of what the protection actually is, but I'm confident you're gonna get adequate protection of this, especially because you can put a lot on and it still sits nicely on the skin. It's a great elegant texture, especially for kids, and it's gonna sink down. You're gonna want to wear it. You're going to want to use it every day like you should be. And with that, it's still the 90 ml for only $10, and it's much higher protection, and it's still very accessible for the most part. So I do recommend this. If you can get this over the original one, just because for me it's more bang for your buck. The tea with this though is that in the US, you can get both of these at Target and a few other retailers. In the UK, however, this is not carried as readily as this one. I had to buy this on Rich Skin. This one's not available. So I had to buy this directly from the Black Girl Sunscreen website. But here's the tea. This still retails for about $10. Shipping was, I don't know, about $5 to $10. So I still paid a relatively affordable price for this, even here in the UK. I think I paid less than £20. So if you're out of the US, it's still semi-accessible, it's still readily available. So if you wanna get it, do so. I'll have the links down in the description box for those as well. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up. Thank you guys again so much for recommending this sunscreen. I had a lot of comments in the last video being like, please try the kids version. I wanna see a video on it. I wanna hear your opinions on it. And so I owe this all to you. Thank you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell, so that you know when I post more skincare, sunscreen, and Fenty related content on my channel. And down below, again, what are your thoughts on this? Have you tried this? Do you want to try it? And which one out of the two of these do you prefer the most? Sound off. Thanks, guys. Bye.